Hi, AB Calculus. Good to see everybody. I hope everybody can see me. I'm really asking you guys when you're doing these questions to take them seriously. I know you can look online and get all the answers, and I'm going to do all the work for you here. It's not about doing the work and taking a picture and sending it in. Just so everybody knows, every single administrator and principal at our school is a part of my Google Classroom as well, and so they want to see that you guys are actually doing work and turning it in. I don't want you doing wrong work and turning it in, so I want you to try a problem, see how you do, and then cross it off and look at how I do things and then re-correct it. Do the best that you can, see how you do well on your own, learn from your mistakes. This is a learning process, and the more you do these, the better you will get. And there are some questions that are killer. Nationally, 2 points out of 9 are earned, or even 1.7 out of 9 are earned. Some are easier. At national average, 5 out of 9 points are earned. So it just depends on the question. Don't get discouraged. You work, you try, you listen, you learn, you're going to do great. Okay, so as you can see here, the question we're doing is 2003 free response number 5. That's one of the assignments that's due today. And hopefully you're watching and paying attention and seeing if you got what's going on. So here we have a picture, and part A says, show that dHdt equals negative square root h over 5. Now the whole reason they want us to eventually to get to this problem. They want us to get to this part of the problem because part B is a separate and integrate, and if you don't have part A correct, you can't do part B. So they already gave you the answer to part A so that you can do part B, because that's where so many of the points are for this question. Okay, this question is not easy, it's not really intuitive, but we're going to go for it. So something that we know is we know the volume formula. Volume is pi r squared h. And in this particular question, the radius cannot change. This is not a coffee pot that's growing, okay? The level of water can go down, the height can change. The radius is not changing. So the very first thing, if you looked online, you would have noticed that they made a 25 here. So the volume we can think of as 25 pi h. All right, now remember, we're trying to get to the derivative. Notice with respect to time. This is a related rates question, so everything gets a chain. The derivative of v will get a dv dt. The derivative of h will get a dh dt. So let's go ahead and take the derivative. We take the derivative and we get dv dt equals, now these are just constants, just like the derivative of 8h would be 8. The derivative of 25 pi h will just be the constant 25 pi, but everything gets a chain. So our chain is dh dt. Now, related rates, of course. Now this is where things get a little interesting. They said, and you have to look very carefully in the writing, okay? But they said the volume of a coffee pot is changing at negative 5 pi square root of h. So if you look at the question, somewhere in the question they tell you that the volume is changing. dv dt is negative 5 pi radical h. So this right here gets replaced with negative 5 pi radical h. Okay, so now that we're here, we just simply need to get the h dt by itself by dividing this to the other side. So we have negative 5 pi radical h, and we're going to divide the 25 and the pi to the other side. And remember, we're trying to make it match this. So the pi's cancel, and you could cancel this and call it negative 1/5, but remember, we're trying to make it match this. So since I'm trying to make it match this, I might as well just write it as it's going to write. So we have a negative and the radical h on top. This is 1 over 5, but I'm just going to leave it as a 5 down here. Now it matches, and that equals dh dt. And that's part A. Now part B is a separate and integrate question. They say, take this differential equation and solve for h as a function for t. So I have dh dt equals negative radical h over 5. And in a separate and integrate question, the first and most important things are to get things on the same side. So anything with an h needs to be over here, dt's need to be over here. So the first thing I would do is I would cross multiply this dt to the other side. If it's on the bottom, it ends up on the top. And now I'm going to move this piece to the other side. And since it's on the top, it's going to move to the bottom. Now, you'll notice I could have taken more things over. But the general rule is bring as little stuff over as possible. So if I brought this over, I still have this negative symbol left here. I could have divided the negative over here, but the less I bring, the better. And technically, I'm going to leave a 1 there. If you remember a long time ago, I said over here this could have been called negative 1/5. So I'm just kind of leaving that negative 1/5 here. I only bring over what I need. And that's step number 1. Step number 2, that's separate. You got to do separate, and now we have to integrate. Now before I would integrate, I'm going to move this to the top. So move it to the top. I'm going to call it h to the negative 1/2. And now we're ready to integrate. Now this is the basic rule, add 1 to the exponent, multiply by the reciprocal. So I add 1 to the exponent, it becomes a positive 1/2, multiply by the reciprocal, I get a 2. On the other side, the antiderivative, think about the antiderivative of, let's say, 5 dx would simply be 5x. So the antiderivative of negative 1/5 would simply be negative 1/5 t. Now, when you take the antiderivative, remember on one of the sides you get a plus c, so we get to get a plus c there. So if I clean this up, this is now 2 square root h, I'll just change that to a square root, equals negative 1/5 t plus c. But we really want to earn more points here, so they give us some initial conditions so that we can solve for c. So if you're looking very carefully at the problem, they say use the fact that the height is 17 when time is 0. So the height is 17 when the time is 0. And if you solve, you just get c is 2 radical 17. And that's going to go back up to there. So I have 2 radical h equals negative 1/5 t plus 2 radical 17. Now, at this part in the problem, I got to get h by itself to get the final point. So I'm going to get h by itself, I'm going to divide by 2, and I'm going to square to get rid of this. So I'm going to divide by 2 or multiply everything by 1/2. So if I multiply everything by 1/2 or divide by 2, let's just do this. We're just going to divide by 2. Looks super ugly. If you want to clean this up, again, I could have made that a 1/2, making this negative 1/10, and then this would have canceled, just leaving the square root of 17. So a cleaner version of this would look like that. Okay? Either way, I have to destroy the square now, the square root with a square. So now I'm going to square both sides. Or in a cleaner version, I would square this side. Either one of these works. I'm going to pick the cleaner one, but remember, earn it. You get all the points, you can leave it ugly. So I now have h by itself. I'm just going to leave it ugly. I like showing off how ugly you can leave an answer. There you go. Nice and ugly. And this is your answer to part C. Finished. All the points. Now, from here, part D is really simple. They want to know, when is the coffee pot empty? Well, coffee pot's empty when there's nothing left in it. The liquid's going to be gone, the height is going to be 0. So we're going to go ahead and make the h 0. So part C is done. H is 0. And to finish, we have to solve for t. Again, I'm going to make it nice and ugly. First, I'm going to get rid of the square by square rooting both sides. Square root of 0 is still 0. Then I'm going to multiply by 2. Multiplying by 2 does nothing, so I'm just going to skip that step. Times 2, 2 times 0 is gone. Now I'm going to subtract this to the other side. And I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal negative 5. So negative 5 times this. And that's going to give me 10 radical 17. And there you go. So, perfect. That's how things are going to roll. This is how I'm just going to take a video, explain it, do the best that I can, and hopefully it'll make more sense to you. Keep practicing. Don't get discouraged. You will get better. Remember, the rest of the nation is taking the same test as you. The curve is going to favor you. You're a hard worker. You're an awesome person, and you know, you're gonna make it happen. So I believe in you. Everything is great. And look at my next video. Bye. And of course, I can't turn it off. This is really awkward for everybody.